Thanks for tuning in to Tax Strategy Digest, where we explore the fascinating world of finance. Join us as we dive into the stories, insights, and experiences of experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are making a difference in this field. Through engaging conversations and thought provoking discussions, we'll take a deep dive into the latest research, trends, and innovations shaping finance. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn something new on this journey here with us. Welcome to this episode of Tax Strategy Digest. Today, our guest is John Jones. John is the founder of Scissortail Executive Advisors, a firm dedicated to helping corporations optimize their 401k plans with a strong emphasis on employee education. John, thanks for hopping on today. Really excited to have you.
Yeah, Paul, I appreciate it. I'm excited to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so John, let's start it out. Tell us about your journey. Tell us who John is.
Yeah, John's a University of Alabama grad, so roll tide, don't hold it against me, people out there. And to be fair, I've been an Alabama fan my whole life. My dad went there, so I'm not a bandwagoner. But started the career after college. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Got an internship at Merrill Lynch. Ended up getting an offer there, and they were like, "Hey, you want to take your Series 7 and 66?" And I was like, "Don't really know what those are, but let's do it." So was lucky to work on a team there of advisors. There were 6 advisors at the time. So, and all of them kind of specialized in something different. There was some on the tax side, the investing side. I was lucky enough. There was a guy by the name of Brian Woodkey on the 401k side. So I got to learn a little bit under him about 401ks, what they are, and then went to work for a insurance firm, just doing 401k plans as well. And then decided to take the leap of faith and start Scissortail about 15, 16 months ago. And that's how I got to where I'm at today.
I love it. And tell us a little bit, just for anybody who's listening, they don't know what a 401k is. Could you explain what it is and maybe how it's a little bit different than a traditional, investment account?
Yeah, absolutely. A 401k plan is meant for employees to put money away from retirement. So what's nice about it is it's payroll deducted from the actual paycheck of an employee and put into an investment account. And the goal is for it to grow over time. And there's certain ways that can be enhanced with matches, education, those type things. But what's super nice about them is an employee gets to pool their money with everybody at the company's money. So with fees, with structures of the plans, you can sometimes get better fees, better investments, and customization from that standpoint. But the 401k, it's a great tool for people to put money away from retirement from their actual paycheck.
I love it. And so how do you go about educating employees and when it comes to these 401k plans?
Yeah, great question. I am big on the education. I think everybody, no matter what their role is at the company, deserves to have the ability to put money away from retirement. So what we really try to do is just get employees comfortable with where they're actually putting their money, because a lot of times you'll talk to an employee that's 45 years old and they started this plan and they're like, I don't even know where it's at and what I have. So I think it's really, we don't dive into the Sharpe and alpha and beta ratios of funds. We really just dive into, hey, here's a overview of what a 401k plan is. Here's what the actual goal is. Here's where your money is and why. So I think it's really getting those employees to trust where their money's at, because no one wants to put their money where they can't trust it and understand it. So that's our overall goal, is just getting each employee comfortable with where that money is going and why.
I love it. So what are some of the strategies that you have found to be most effective in improving employee participation and investment decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from the employer side, it's definitely if you have a match on the plan. I think that's pretty straightforward. What we find and what the data shows is that an employee is always going to try to put up to at least that match percentage. So whether that's dollar for dollar up to 3% or 50 cents on the dollar up to 6, you're always going to see the employee try to stretch to get to that number. I think another thing that we do, and it's so simple, is just called the 1% challenge. And that's encouraging employees just to increase it by 1%. And we'll break that down based on their paycheck and show them that, because at the end of the day, the investments are great. The fees reducing are great. But the quickest way for you to grow that account balance is from what the actual employee puts in it. So if they can put in more money over time, even if that's just 0.5% or 1% more each year up to a certain percentage, that's an education campaign that I've ran my whole career and will continue to run it because I truly do believe in it, and am passionate about it because, I can run the numbers on the back end. If a 38-year-old only puts in 1%, what that actually is going to accrue at the age of 68. And so when you break down and able to show them that, it's a cool moment when the employees understand that.
Have you seen any employers who, for whatever reason, they just don't want to offer, 401k plans to their employees or any sort of match, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you do see it, especially on startup plans and
Okay.
smaller companies. I think the 401k plan is great if your company's ready for it. Because what I tell employers all the time is when you're starting up a 401k plan, you have to start it correctly, especially if you're a company that wants to scale over time. Especially it's 401k plans are great for retention and recruiting. A lot of the times when we're talking to HR professionals, the top two questions are, hey, what's my medical going to cost me, and is there a match on the 401k plan? I think those two, the health and wealth, kind of go hand in hand together on that. Sometimes employers will offer an ESOP plan or something a little bit differently, but a lot of the times on those middle-sized to bigger corporations, all of them really have a 401k offering. On the matching standpoint, those differ. I was actually talking to a buddy the other day. They've got a discretionary match, and this is a $2-3 billion company. And, sometimes they get a match, sometimes they don't. So it really, when it comes down to it, is the employer's goals, what they're looking for. But from the employer side, I think it's a huge recruiting tool. If you can offer a good match on a plan, and at the end of the day, especially in this day and age with the market, inflation, how everything is, if your employees can feel more comfortable that they're financially secure, especially and 401k can be used as a tool. Studies show they're going to be more productive at work. More financial stress leads to less productivity, and 401k is one of those tools you can use to help that with an employer match.
So have you, and you might not have these numbers, but have you kind of seen a higher retention for employers that do offer a higher match? Is that a correlation that is a thing, or is that not really a correlation?
Yeah, I don't have the exact data on it. I can speak on my book of business and our company's book of business. When you look at employers that offer really, really good matches versus employers that don't, absolutely. And like I said, I don't have the specific data on that. I'm just going off of, but like I have an employer that offers all the way up to 10%, and their average employee, it's a bank, I would probably say is in their 20 year. Like, that's unheard of nowadays. But it's a smaller town, it's a bank, and they treat their employees really, really well. I think 401k is a big part of that, but I think your overall benefits package that you offer to the employees has a big, big impact on keeping them there. I'm a true believer in that. It's one of the reasons why I opened this company, to try to help employers offer the best overall benefit package. So absolutely.
Are there any innovations, or maybe changes in the horizon that you think are going to shape the way that people are saving for retirement?
I think there are a couple. I think the 401k plan is pretty set in stone. I think it's tough to have innovations with that. You can get specific on certain matches, vesting periods, tiered matches, those type things. I think there's some other retirement tools like non-qual plans are offering, corporate owned life insurance. Those type plans definitely on innovation for some of your top employees. Overall, I think the 401k plan is a great tool. I don't think personally it needs a ton of changes. I think what it needs is advisors that know about 401k plans, know how to educate, know the process. Because I think that's the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems with 401k plans, is a lot of employees don't have the right education or even a plan in place. So with getting those plans in places, having the right education, I think those are the biggest areas of opportunity right now in the 401k plan.
What is something that a lot of people you speak with are really missing? Just one general kind of rule of thumb that maybe they're looking at, their 401k and they just had no idea that this was available to them or this certain type of thing would benefit them in some way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the example that I gave a little bit earlier is it's gotten better with the introduction of target dates and CITs and some of those type funds. But with some of the older employees, it's like, hey, I just put it in this large cap fund when I was 28 or 30 and never looked at it again. And your risk tolerance at 28 versus 68 are two completely different risk tolerances. So I know I've said it that does fall back on the education, but I think 401k is not something you want to look at daily. You're not day trading it. You're not, but it's something that I think people miss out on. That's something you definitely need to be looking at quarterly or semi-annually just to make sure that, hey, I'm where I need to be. I'm diversified correctly. I think that from an employee standpoint is where a lot of people, and then this one's going to sound crazy, beneficiaries. That's been one of the biggest things that we've seen that employees, life happens. You go through a divorce, you go through your spouse passes away, you name it, and people do not update beneficiaries, and that beneficiary goes over any trust, any will. So we have seen where, there's a divorce and something happens to the main account holder and that X gets the account. And it's so beneficiaries of all things are kind of a hot topic right now.
So in your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen companies facing when they're trying to design and manage these 401k plans?
Yeah, I think from a competitive standpoint, with the 401k plan now, more and more companies are getting savvy with it, with the vesting schedule, the match, the eligibility period, being able to offer profit sharing, those type things. I think those companies that are thriving with their benefits package overall are the ones that are seeing the most success at retaining and recruiting that top talent right now. I think companies a lot of times put the 401k kind of in the back end of things. They might review it once a year with a committee or review it with an advisor. But I think it's something that you do need to stay on top of because, like I said, the plan you put in place at $1 million versus the plan you put in place at $10 million probably should be two different plans. A lot of times, and I'm sorry if any record keepers are on here and going to listen to this, but a lot of times the record keepers aren't coming to you saying, hey, you're at 4 million now, you got a fee reduction. You've got to be a little proactive on that. And same thing on the investments. I think when plans get set early, a lot of times they're in proprietary funds. As you grow and can go into open architect and some of those items, you can probably get a better fund offering at a cheaper price. And so I think it's really managing the 401k correctly.
So you help corporations with this. What does your day-to-day look like and who are you speaking with on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I could show you my calendar right now. It changes daily. But certain clients need certain things. We have clients that we meet with quarterly. They've got extensive benefits packages. They have extensive 401k plan. They're really on top of the fiduciary oversight, the compliance, kind of the back end things. They want education semi-annually for their employees. Some employers, have a more simple plan. They want to meet once a year. They want education at open enrollment. So I think it really depends on your book of business. We will meet with any employee. It doesn't matter if they have $500 or 500,000. Like I said, we're very passionate that everybody should have education when it comes to retirement. So like today I met with two employees. They wanted to review their accounts. We've got people on our team that do that as well. So I think it varies day to day, but what I found in this space is you can set it up correctly if you've got the processes in place. Processes is the biggest thing from the actual advisor side, in my opinion, on the 401k plan is having those processes in place. There's always so much new information, Secure Act, legislation, fund changes, you name it. So you really do have to stay on top of it to make sure that your employees and employers are in the best best case scenario.
Is there a question that you get pretty frequently?
Do I have enough money to retire?
Okay.
That is that, and that's probably one of the number one questions I get, and that's a case by case basis. And that's a big question. Another question is if it isn't a good match, is why is our match this? Are you going to change it? And it's some of those things, but definitely on the retire. And so that's one reason why we try to get everybody comfortable with what they're putting in. We do those 1% challenges, the education, because like I said, if employees have financial stress, they're going to be less productive at work. So we try to limit as much as we can from at least the 401k side with what they're putting in and the investments they're in, making sure that they're diversified correctly.
I like it. Um, if there's advisors that are listening right now, how could they get in this space? If they wanted to get started in it, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I would every with all the big record keepers, your Transamerica, Fidelity, Empower, Voya, you name it, they all have wholesalers in each state. I would absolutely contact the wholesaler for a couple of those big record keepers and let them know, say, hey, Paul, I really want to get into the 401k space. Can you send me some more information on how I can do that? I would really lean on the record keepers. I mean, they see so many plans daily, different from startups all the way to 100 plus million. So they've got a good scope of knowledge and a good scope of material. Also, I would look for local TPAs, third-party administrators. They're the ones that do the compliance, the testing on the 401k plans when they're unbundled. They're a wealth of knowledge as well. I'm calling our TPA partners. You asked on what my schedule looks like. I've got a couple probably daily. I'm like, hey, what are we doing here? What's this? Because they deal with a lot of that compliance back end work. So I would definitely say local record keeper or local TPAs and record keepers are a great place to start. If you're somebody who likes to read, organizations like NAPA, NAPA, they have great white papers. They have great insight on the 401k space. They run probably the biggest conference each year for the 401k world. So there's definitely ways to get in. And then I would pick the brains like I did of 401k advisors, people who really specialize in the space, because it definitely is a different space than a private wealth client that's got $1 million versus a 401k plan with $1 million. There's just being ERISA bonded and being ERISA bond, like there's different regulations and things you have to follow. So those are probably the three, four main things.
So I don't want to jump back too far in this, but I do want to ask, is there ever a time where you think it would make sense for a company to not offer a 401k plan, or for an employee, if even if it was offered, to not partake in it? Is that something that would really ever happen, or what would you say to that?
I think more on when it's a younger company, yes. I think that is very fair. I think you have to be ready to offer it because, like I said, you need to set it up correctly from the front end.
Right.
Because if not, you're gonna fail testing. You're highly compensated. Are going to be getting refunds. They're going to have to pay taxes on those. They're going to be upset. I think sometimes employers jump that box a little early, just to check it out. Check the box. Yeah, hey, we offer a 401k. But it can lead to bigger problems if you don't offer it correctly. I think from the employee standpoint, that's a good question. I think every employee has to be comfortable with putting in money into the 401k plan because at the end of the day, it is for retirement. Now there's loans and hardships depending on your plan design that you can get the money out. But each employee has to take that on a case by case basis. I try to get every employee just to even put $10 a paycheck or 1% of their pay, just so they can have some type of growth and get comfortable with the 401k plan. But at the end of the day, if an employee tells us they cannot do it for XYZ, we're not pressuring them to put the money in. We just want to give them all their options.
Perfect. Well, have you ever had a mentor getting into this space? Could you talk a little bit about that, and if there's someone listening, how they could maybe find a mentor?
Yeah, so I would say I had two. I was very lucky on one. First was like I talked about the Merrill Lynch advisor. That was being in the right place at the right time. And then second, my dad was actually in the 401k world. And it's funny, I was finally able to call him. When it's like in fifth grade, bring your parent to work day, my dad would come. I had no clue what he did. I was finally able to call him about a year after college and be like, I know what you're doing. He worked on the wholesale side, and then was an advisor for a little bit. So I was lucky enough to have him I got to work with him for a little bit as well. So it's like I mentioned earlier, there are people that specialize, and I'm going to put that in parentheses, in the 401k world. I think again, utilizing record keepers and the local TPA saying like, hey, especially if you're a younger advisor, hey, who's doing this and who's been doing it? Is that something you're comfortable setting up a coffee with, or something? Or even I've gone on LinkedIn to pick the brain of people. There's a couple people that I've met with that are in the 401k space and own their own practice and have been doing this and had great meetings with them. So I think it's just, putting that foot in the water and jumping into it. It can be an overwhelming space when you're looking at it from somebody who's never done it. I still learn something new every day, and I've been doing this for 7, 8 years now. But there are tools out there. There are people that'll help. I'm happy to help to any of the listeners. And I know you'll probably put my information out there because once you're in this space and get some of your processes down, get some of your knowledge base down, it is a really, really good space where you can make an impact in people's lives and get them money for retirement that they maybe wouldn't have had beforehand.
So this might be very similar to what you just said, but I always like to ask people towards the end of the podcast, what is your why and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my why is personal on my family side. So I watched my grandma, she worked at the same corporation for I think from 25 all the way to 72 or 73. It was almost 50 years. And I watched her leave that job with not one saving in a 401k plan and really any savings at all. She had to move in with my parents. She passed away. I watched the stress that caused the whole family. And what's crazy is when I first started working, when I went through college and started working at Merrill and even my next job, I never really put together what that why was. And then one day I was sitting there and I was like, why am I so passionate? Because there are advisors and there are record keepers that are saying, like, why are you doing so much education? And I never really knew why. And it clicked. And I'm like, that's why. And so that's my whole why on the 401k side and why I'm so passionate about it.
I love it. Well, as we wrap up, if someone's listening right now, they would love to reach out to you. Maybe they have some questions or they just want to learn more. What's the best way they can reach you?
Yeah, either LinkedIn or email. I think you have my LinkedIn, and so I'll let you shoot that out because my name is John Jones. It's a pretty generic first name and a pretty generic last name, so it might be a little tougher to find. But my company's Scissortail Executive Advisors. So if you type in John Jones in that, it should pop up. Or my email at john.jones@scissortailea.com. I'm happy to chat with anybody who has any questions wanting to get in this space, maybe has a prospect that's an advisor and wants to do some field work to learn how to do it. Happy to do that as well. So any way I can help or send material over, I'm happy to do it.
Perfect. Well, John, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing some insights with everybody. And really, again, I just really appreciate your time. I had a blast.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Paul.